he has settled on not Loam. Something much different. He's got a bit of a...
He said it was Loam or Zoo.
Yeah, he's got a domain Zoo deck here, and it is a little bit different, I think, than what we might be used to here. Take a look at the deck list here. He's got 4 copies of Geist of Saint Traft, 4 Curdaves, 4 Loam Lions, 4 Tarmogoyfs, 4 Wild Nakados, of course, 2 Gorkland Rampagers, 2 Snapcaster Mages. You've got Gorkland Rampager listed underneath the creatures here, but we all know that's
it's not really a creature.
That's more of a spell. As Ben Cohen on left, he's going to start off with Malirapod. He's starting off with Verdant Catacombs, and round number 1 of Grand Prix Richmond is underway. Van Lunen with the Scalding Tarn.
Yeah, so what Jacob's done with his list is he's actually put Geist of St. Traft back in the deck, and that's something that wasn't popular at the Pro Tour because everyone was expecting Wild Nakados.
Okay.
When your opponent has blockers, that guy's pretty tough to get through. If everyone's playing Blue, White, Red Control, it's an amazing card. I think, unfortunately for Jacob, he's hit one of the decks that still has no problem blocking a 2/2, and that's Malirapod.
Now, we're going to see here quite a bit. You know, if you watch a lot of coverage from Star City games, what you're going to see on day 1 is you see Standard. You'll see dual lands, but you won't see fetch lands getting the dual lands. On day 2, you'll see fetch lands getting actual dual lands. So now we're going to see a lot of 20 to 17 action here with the fetch land getting a dual land. That's what Van Lunen's going to do. Go down to 17, get a stomping ground. Start off with the unbanned Kitty Cats in Wild Nikado.
Yeah, and like I said, we didn't see any of this card at the Pro Tour, but it was defining the Pro Tour a lot more than I think people realized. You know, it was shaping the metagame behind the scenes. It was shaping it enough that everyone was playing decks that beat it.
You'll see Cohen's going to sacrifice the Verdant Catacombs, get a Temple Garden on the end step. We'll get those life totals updated for you guys at home. 17 for Van Lunen, 19 for Cohen. Now, of course, when you look at the Birthing Pod deck here, you're going to see a lot of singletons in that deck list and you know, what is he looking for to get in this particular Zoo match? Obviously, he wants to get Finks established and get Birthing Pod going, but does he have any spicy singletons for this matchup?
Well, so he has a lot of decent cards for this matchup. Just cards like Scavenging Ooze, Voice of Resurgence are all pretty good in the matchup. Interestingly enough, the Malirapod, a lot of people, when they think about Pod, they think about a combo deck, right? So the combo in Malirapod is Viscera Seer plus Malira plus Kitchen Finks, or Viscera Seer plus Malira plus Murderous Redcap. But in a matchup like this, Ben's not even looking to combo his opponent. He's just trying to create a lot of value off come into play creature effects, basically, he's going to just try to gum up the board and value his opponent out of the game, and really the combo will happen as an afterthought if it happens at all.
We see Wild Nikado getting in the red zone here for Van Lunen. Of course, Cohen playing an Avacyn's Pilgrim. Not a card you often see in the Malirapod deck. I assume it's probably just a one-of hiding out in there as another mana accelerant. We know, of course, we see Noble Hierarch. Deathrite Shaman no longer with us, thankfully or unthankfully, depending on what side you're on.
He has 2 Nobles and 1 Pilgrim. I want to say that's a card availability issue, probably.
Okay.
But it's really about the same. There's very few, if any. I don't believe he has any blue cards in his deck, so it's going to be the same card.
You see Van Lunen plays a Curdape there, but does not play a second land. Cohen is ahead on the mana. He's got a snow-covered swamp out there, a couple Temple Gardens, and an Avacyn's Pilgrim. Doesn't do anything on his 3rd turn, so we don't know if he's flooding out. Maybe he has a card like a Restoration Angel. Who knows? But Van Lunen's going to start off with a Lightning Bolt. Cohen's going to add a white mana. We're going to move to the combat step. So let's see if Cohen has something to play here. Maybe a Court of Calling. I guess he doesn't have the 3rd green to actually play Court of Calling, but you do see a Restoration Angel in his hand right now, so he may deploy the 3/4, which will obviously block the way of these 2 creatures.
Yeah, and I think the biggest dagger here for Jacob isn't, I mean, he doesn't have the other land, but that's fine because he has a lot of lightning bolts. The bigger thing is like his Nakado's a 2/2 right now. He's actually sacrificing a lot of strength on the battlefield by not hitting the land.
So Restoration Angel there does show up. Here's a Birds of Paradise for Cohen. Going to attack for 3 here with the Angel Will Ben. So Van Lunen's going to go down to 14.
Yeah. Now this is actually pretty interesting. A lot of times the Malirapod player would just sit back and block and just kind of create value. Ben's opted to be on the aggressive side here, and I think that's because he sees his opponent stuck on 1 land. Yeah,
I mean, you know, I feel like a longer game maybe favors Ben. You know, there's a typical saying of, you know, mana screw beats mana flood. Not to say that Ben is flooding or anything, but he could play a little bit more defensively. But he says, I want to start getting some damage dealt to you, Mr. Van Lunen. As you see, Jacob is going to come across here. There's an Abrupt Decay to take care of the Kitty Cat.
Yeah, so he's right now trading 3 damage for 2, so this is actually fine for Ben.
Yep.
If Jacob commits more to the board, Ben may have to change strategies.
Van Lunen in his hand right now, he does have another copy of Lightning Bolt. He's also got a Helix and a Tribal Flames in his hand, as Cohen's going to come across for 3 yet again with the Angel, going to knock Van Lunen down to 11. We'll see if Ben has a follow-up, and he does. Our first of what I assume is going to be many copies of Kitchen Finks today, as Ben is going to move up to 17.
He does play 4 Kitchen Finks. It's their best card against Zoo. It's the cornerstone of their strategy. You mentioned Jacob had 9 points of burn in his hand, so Ben being at 15 was actually a little bit of a concern, but Kitchen Finks is just going to shore that up.
And when we say Domain Zoo there underneath Van Lunen's name, what that basically means is that he has access to all 5 colors of mana. He may touch into those colors for sideboard cards, he may not. But the one thing that's going to turn on is a card like Tribal Flames, of course. Some of these versions do play Might of Alara as well. Jacob is not playing that card in his main deck this weekend.
Yeah, so this is one of the older takes on Zoo. I didn't see too much of this at the Pro Tour. I think a lot of players have moved away from this because instead of having to play Might of Alara, you can just play Gore Clan Rampager, and Jacob's actually made that swap nonetheless. But you're right, Tribal Flames, I mean, 5 damage for 2 mana is the most efficient burn spell you can pretty much get in the format.
There's just a card for Van Lunen. Going to pass the turn back over to Cohen. You see his board right now of a 2-1 Kitchen Finks, that 3-4 Restoration Angel, a Bird of Paradise, and he's got the necessary mana with 2 Temple Gardens, a Snow-Covered Swamp, and a Snow-Covered Plains. As the Restoration Angel going to come across again, he's been aggressive from the start. He's going to keep being aggressive. He's going to follow up with the Boogeyman in Birthing Pod.
And then Jacob's not even
That is a quick one. That is a quick concession. I know Van Lunen knowing that he's dead there. And the reason being, of course, is Birthing Pod is completely ridiculous. Upon activation, it only takes 1, maybe 2. Jacob was already behind quite a bit there, so he does pick it up rather quickly. And we'll see Ben Cohen win our first game here at GPRichmond.
Yeah, so it's interesting to talk about, what would Ben be doing with that Birthing Pod? Why is it so good? I mean, the card creates a lot of value. To walk you through a line that he could have done there is he could have, sacrificed Kitchen Finks to get Murderous Red Cap. I believe that would have taken out one of Jacob's creatures. He didn't have the 2/2 left. He had 2 3s.
Yeah, he had 2 3s. I mean, he can go upstairs. It's obviously a difficult card to get through with the Curd Apes, and then, I'm sure he's got some other nice targets to get.
Eventually, he works his way up to Revel Arc, and he can Revel Arc an entire combo back into play.
Sure.
He can hit Ranger of Eos, and he can set up a combo if he needs to. It's too much value really for Jacob to compete with.
Especially at that stage in the game for Van Lunen, when he's stumbling on mana, is already pretty far behind. So Ben Cohen, again, going to win game number 1. We're going to take a look at the sideboards here. We'll start with Jacob Van Lunen, as he will be on the play. I've got that in front of me. I'm taking a look at 2 Ancient Grudge, 1 Combust, 1 Mutagenic Growth, 1 Ranger of Eos, 1 Relic of Progenitus, 2 copies of Stony Silence, 2 Spell Pierce, 2 Thalia Garden of Thraben, a Destructive Revelry, and 2 copies of Burrington Forge Tender. You're going to see this a lot in sideboards over the course of the weekend. Lots of singletons, and then 2 of. You're not going to see 4-4-4-3. That's not going to happen in a format this diverse.
No, you have to, especially when decks have a lot of tutoring available to them, like something like Malyrapod, there's no reason to play 4 of a card. This is a lot more close to Legacy in that, you just have a lot of 1-ofs in your sideboard.
Now, the other thing you're going to notice here in the sideboard for Van Lunen, I think this is going to be a common recurrence over the course of the day, is because Malyrapod is so diverse in what it can do, and there isn't one thing that it's trying to do. Yes, it can gain infinite life. Yes, it can deal infinite damage, but it's this kind of, grindy mid-range deck that incidentally has these combos. So there isn't one card that just, I'm going to get this card, I'm going to play 4 copies of it, and I'm going to shut you down. That card doesn't exist. That's part of the reason that this deck is so powerful. So we take a look at Van Lunen's sideboard. Again, he does have some options here. A card like Relic of Progenitus does a nice job against the Persist cards, but it doesn't do a good job against, some of the other things that the deck is trying to accomplish, like Birthing Pod, for example.
Right.
You've got a card like Destructive Reveler and Ancient Grudge that takes care of Birthing Pod, but as we saw in that last game, Ben really didn't need Birthing Pod to win the game. So, you've got a lot of options that are okay, but none of them say Malyrapod, enough of you, you're dead. That's not how it works.
Right, so what you want to do is really you just side out, you just try to slowly adapt your deck in the matchup. I would imagine we'll see Jacob Van Lunen cut some of his Geist of St. Traps just because they don't deal enough damage. That, you don't want to swing a Geist of St. Traps into a Kitchen Finks.
Yep.
It's 4 damage, and then they gain 2 life back, and you lose your creature. So I do think cards like Relic of Progenitus just give him more utility in the matchup. That's a card that can actually shut off a combo if Ben ever goes for it. It can get a Kitchen Finks. At the very worst, it draws a card, and that's probably enough.
Now on Ben's side, we talked about singletons. He's got a couple of those.
Well, Malyrapod's a deck that utilizes its singletons very well because it can just it has Court of Calling, it has Birthing Pod. So by putting in 1 card, you can actually change your matchups quite a bit. And they usually do. So for example, Malyrapod here, they gain access to Obstinate Baloth in the deck, which is a 4/4 for 4 that gains 4 life. That's excellent against Domain Zoo. He also in his sideboard has access to Lingering Souls. I am not positive whether or not he brings that in. I would think that certainly is a better way to just gum up the board and stop himself from getting attacked. He has an additional copy of, he has 2 additional copies of Path to Exile, which I think would be great in this matchup as well. Outside of that, he has other cards that are singletons for different matchups. He has like a Kataki, a Harmonic Sliver. I don't really see those being used.
Yeah, the thing that's really tough here for Van Lunen, too, is that, he is the aggressive deck in this matchup, of course. He doesn't get to shift roles and play the control deck. Ben is very clearly the control deck, even though we saw him get a little bit more aggressive. And you see the elements in Ben's sideboard. You mentioned the past, the Lingering Souls. He's even got a Shriekmaw hiding out in his sideboard. He can get even more defensive, but incidentally, Van Lunen has to be able to keep the pressure on and get through those defenses, because at any point, Ben can assemble the ability to gain infinite life via Kitchen Finks, Malyra itself, and Viscera Seer, and then it's just lights out.
Yeah, so Jacob's really going to have to just he's going to have to stay in the aggressive role. He can't really change his role. He just needs to try to get a couple new weapons.
Unfortunately for Van Lunen, he did not start off with a 1-drop. Both players should keep their 7. As you see, Jacob's going to sacrifice Arid Mesa, get a Stomping Ground on the end of Ben's turn. Ben played a Razorverge Thicket and played a Noble Hierarch, so he's already got the mana acceleration engine kind of going for his deck. We'll see what Van Lunen has for his second turn, but he needs to get on the board here. He got to get moving.
Yeah, in a deck with 12 1-drops like Domain Zoo, all of its best draws are the triple 1-drop draws. So for you to keep something without a 1-drop, you have to have a pretty good hand. So I'm interested to see what Jacob has in store for us here.
He's going to play a Scalding Target. He's going to sacrifice that, go down to 18. We'll see what dual land he's going to search out, as I assume he's going to go down to 16 here momentarily, and he does. Going to go get a Hallowed Fountain. So he's got 4 colors of the rainbow, just needs the black to be able to have those fully powered Tribal Flames from his deck, and we'll see what the follow-up is going to be here for Van Lunen.
Yeah, you have to be extra careful when fetching with this deck. It's actually probably one of the more difficult parts about playing Domain Zoo. For example, he can't Blood Rush a Gorklan Rampager off this mana.
That's true.
So yeah, you have to be aware of things like that when playing.
One thing too as well with this deck, and I played this deck many moons ago when Raphael Levy went back-to-back with it at Grand Prix. I actually just spent a lot of time goldfishing the deck and looking at the opening hands and saying, okay, what fetch land search for what land so that I have all the mana, because that's a real thing with this deck. You have to know what fetch lands get what, and how it's going to, the course of the game, how it's going to go. Because if you search for the wrong land and aren't able to cast, 2 spells in one turn, or as you mentioned, look at his mana base right now, he's got a Gorklan Rampager in his hand and he can't Blood Rush it.
Right.
That's a real problem as he draws the Plains now. So now his mana's kind of constricted because, when you're playing Domain Zoo, you want to have access to a lot of red mana.
Yeah,
he doesn't have that.
By searching out the white, it gave him the ability to cast Path to Exile. It gave him the ability to cast potential Lightning Helixes. So he couldn't have, I don't know if he could have searched out something that casts, well, he could have searched out a Sacred Foundry if you wanted to cast both, but then he'd be sacrificing part of his domain, which is also very important.
Van Lunen's going to come across with that 1/2 Tarmogoyf into a Spellsky. You see Cohen is considering blocking, and the Gorklan Rampager is going to try to Blood Rush. We're going to stop him right now here because he is unable to do that, and this is exactly what you mentioned of, it seems like, it would be a free roll. I'm Domain Zoo. I can do whatever I want.
Your lands don't actually do everything, and you have to be aware of that.
These are not 5-color lands, and you see Van Lunen saying, okay, this doesn't work out the way that I want to. He does have a Lightning Bolt in his hand. You see him shaking his head here. Looks like I may have searched out the wrong land. This is a little bit awkward. You're blocked with the Spellsky. It seems like it may have been okay. Now you've got a Curdape. There's a Blood Crypt. Had he played that pre-combat, he would have been able to actually...
There's the post-combat Blood Crypt.
He would have actually been able to Blood Rush, so... There is a learning curve with this Zoo deck, as you see Cohen's going to sacrifice Verdant Catacombs and go get an Overgrown too.
And he said he switched Audible to this deck last night, so he didn't get many reps in with it. And one of the things my opinions on Modern is that I almost feel like practice games are more important than your deck choice.
I could not agree more with you.
Yeah, this format has a learning curve, much like Legacy, where you need to know your deck, and that's probably the most important thing.
A lot of people at home know that I'm a huge proponent of Green Red Tron, and I've never said Green Red Tron is the best deck, but it's the best deck for me. And the reason I say that is because that's the deck I have the most games with.
Right.
And I feel comfortable in a lot of matchups where I think if you pick up and play the deck, you might not feel comfortable. Again, I don't think it's the best deck. It's hard to say if there even is a best deck in this format. I think if you polled some people, they'd probably say it's Pod. But that deck, the Pod is only good if you play the deck a ton. like a Sam Pardee or a Josh McClain.
Well, we saw that at the Pro Tour. For example, Wilson, McClain, Pardee, they've all been playing Pod for months. Sean McLaren, lesser known person, actually just plays blue-white control in every format.
Yeah.
You know, you saw Finko playing Storm. You know, I was playing a fast combo deck. If you actually looked at a lot of, Ben Stark was playing red-green Scape Shift.
Sure.
These are all decks that all of us had like previous tournament experience with.
Yep.
And it's not surprising. You could guess almost what every player was on just by what they have historically played.
I think the big, you know, you mentioned the players who played Malira Pod, also Patrick Diekman, who's been playing Twin for, I don't even know how long.
He'd won a Grand Prix with Tarmo Twin already.
Yes, he's been playing, you know, Twin forever, and it doesn't surprise you to see him make the top 8 with the deck and just know how to play Twin so well, because there's so many things that go into Twin. You know, some Twin players who pick up the deck, you know, they're a little bit fidgety. You know, when Diekman has 3 mana open to be able to cast a Pest Reminder to Deceiver Exarch, you have to respect that. As you see an attack here from Van Lunen, he's going to get him with the Tarmogoyf. That's a 1-2. It's actually going to turn into a 2-3 now that we have an instant in the graveyard from Court of Calling. And that Kurdiep also going to be a 2-3. But we're going to see what Ben's going to be able to cord up here. And it looks like he's probably going to put something in a way to do some blocking.
I would just think it could be a Kitchen Finks. Remember, Jacob's at the ready with a Path to Exile, and he's probably going to have to path whatever it is Ben finds, which means he'll path the Spellskite.
Yeah. If Ben wants him to path the Spellskite, it's up to him, of course.
It depends. If it's a Kitchen Finks, okay, it's going to be Voice of Resurgence. That's not going to actually be able to block the Tarmogoyf, but Ben's at such a high life total that he may not care.
I mean, the thing that he can do here, actually, is he can block, and then the Voice of Resurgence is going to become a 4-4.
Right.
And then if Van Lunen does have a path, he takes care of the Spellskite, as you did mention. Now, one interaction that's going to take place here, of course, is that if we do go down this road, he passes Spellskite, that means the Voice of Resurgence would be boltable or helixable now. So there is that to keep in mind as well. Also, let's not forget that, you know, Van Lunen, the previous turn, had that little hiccup with the Gorkland Rampager. So blocking might not be the best idea here for Cohen. You can't redirect Blood Rush, of course,
right.
to Spellskite.
He knows that there's a Gorkland Rampager hiding out.
And, you know, it might be this thing where Ben is basically saying, well, I need to get past this point in the game. And Gorkland Rampager, Blood Rush, and that might just be your whole turn.
Yeah, that means that Jacob wouldn't put another creature on the board, which that would be a victory for Ben.
Yeah. You see Van Lunen says, okay, that's fine. Tarmogoyf is going to take down Voice of Resurgence. Trigger, you're going to get an Elemental token. We're going to get an Evan Irwin Voice of Resurgence token out here in just a moment. You saw Kurdiep get in for 2 points of damage. Van Lunen going to tap that Plains. Looks like you might actually see Gorkland Rampager be hard cast.
Well, good thing we didn't Blood Rush it.
So he will add a creature to the board. There's a 4-4 Trampler. Going to pass the turn back to Cohen as he'll untap all of his permanents. Tarmogoyf will be a 3-4 now that there's a creature in the graveyard. So you do see the Tarmogoyf die tick up there. Cohen draws another copy of Voice of Resurgence. What you don't find right now is a Birthing Pod, which obviously turns this deck from 0 to 60 very quickly, but you know, the deck can still play fair Magic. I think that Birthing Pod is just the card that really turns it into an unfair deck.
Yeah, so what he's gonna, like, the late game that Pod can go toward here is he can chump block and Kitchen Finks his way to staying at high life total, and eventually if he hits that Revelark at the top of his curve, then he can, you know, Revelark can trade with a creature, get back 2 Voice of Resurgences, kind of make this like infinite grinding play that's just really hard to get through.
There is that other copy of Voice of Resurgence from Cohen, so that's going to come into play. And you know, what he's doing right now is, as we mentioned, he's just going to play the control role. He's going to gum things up, he's going to make it really ugly, he's going to make attacking difficult for Van Lunen, or at least try his best to do that until maybe he does find a Birthing Pod or a Court of Calling or assemble one of the infinite combos his deck can do.
Right.
Going to play Temple Guardian to play tapped as well. But this is what makes this deck so tough because, you know, a lot of people identify with Pod. They think of it as just this deck. Oh, it's got an infinite combo. And
it's a combo deck.
If I stop from infinite comboing, they've just got a bunch of mediocre stuff. But there's nothing mediocre about his board position right now.
So I pretty much like to play combo decks. And I know when I talk about combo decks in the format, I never even bring up Pod. And people are like, well, Pod's a combo deck, right? And my response is, not really.
Yeah,
like,
not quite.
There's a combo in it, but this doesn't play like a combo deck.
Yeah.
This is like a mid-range deck.
Mid-range deck that just incidentally has a combo in it.
Right.
It just happens to be a really good combo against pretty much everybody. The fact that it can go infinite, gain infinite life or deal infinite damage makes it a pretty good combo. You see Van Lunen drew a Geistlessing Trap for the turn, has a Lightning Bolt, has, I believe, another Rampager in his hand, and also has a Path to Exile. So he's obviously got to make his way through. The Spellskite's the one that's making things difficult right now.
Yeah, he's opted to keep the Geist in. I think that's that could pay off for him. If he can make a board where Geist ever gets through, it's great. I think as we see here, though, that's a tall order, as Jacob actually wasn't able to attack this turn because of the 5/5.
Now, there's a card that Cohen plays that is another aspect of this deck, because we talk about the grindiness of this deck and the fact that it does have a combo, but it can play a more fair game. Gavin Township lets it play a very, very fair game.
Right, so actually he's not a combo deck at all. He's just going to play 5 things and then Gavin his team a bunch. And that's probably more than Zoo can deal with.
Yep.
Which, you know, so it's like, wait, but I thought you were a combo deck. It's like, no, and sure, I you know, at some level it is, but look at this. This is 5/1/1 counters on you guys. That's huge.
You see, Birds of Paradise is actually the thing that's getting into the red zone here. It was coming across because of Noble Hierarch giving an Exalted. Gavin Township's going to make it start attacking for 2, then 3, then 4. And now all of a sudden, Van Lunen's going to actually have to do something about that. But Spellskite is in the way. Van Lunen has a Lightning Bolt. Feel free.
Well, a pair of Path to Exiles are in his hand, and if you're Van Lunen, you have to start firing off these removal spells. You need to kill all the creatures before they start getting really big.
And we haven't even mentioned as well that he does need to fire off these removal spells, but he needs to do it on his turn because Voice of Resurgence being out there, as opposed to Ben's turn, because the last thing Van Lunen wants is those elementals coming out. You take a look at the elemental that's on the table right now. It's a 6/6. His creatures are a 2/3, a 3/4, a 2/2, and a 4/4. This is the thing that makes this deck so very difficult to beat, because everything is going the way that Ben wants it to, and every turn that Jacob gives him is one turn closer that he's finding a birthing pod, finding his way towards infinite life or infinite damage. So Ben is accomplishing exactly what he wants to. Let's gum it up, and you see Van Lunen's going to come across here a Geist and trigger the Angel, but how profitable is of an attack is this really?
Well, it's 4 damage, but that's hardly raising Ben. Remember, Ben is just playing defense. Like, yes, he has a great threat in terms of Gavoni Township every turn, but at the same time, this isn't even using any of Ben's cards. You know, if the race starts going bad for Ben, he can go back to casting spells.
Yeah, yep. Ben right now is just kind of priced into, just pump some stuff and get some damage in, and you can't really attack. He's going to double block here with the Voice of Resurgence token that is currently a 6/6. That can shrink at any time, given that Van Lunen has removal spells, and Voice of Resurgence itself, which is a 3/3. So I think we're going to see a little bit of action here in a moment.
Right, he's wisely double blocking to play around a path to like a double. Even if that plays on even 2 removal spells. He can skite 1, and the other removal spell goes to one of the creatures, and he'll still get the Geist of St. Traft.
You know, one of the things I love about Modern is just kind of a double block like this, where, you know, there's a lot that goes into this decision of blocking, because your opponent can have a lot of different things. We've seen Gorkland Rampager from Jacob's deck. We've seen Bolt. Mutagenic Growth is a card. You know, there are a lot of different things that Van Lunen can have in this situation. A double block feels relatively safe.
Yeah, Rampager is the card that blows out the double block, so to speak.
You see a Path to Exile here is going to target Voice of Resurgence. We'll see if Ben wants to pay the 2 life to Spellskite to redirect this, and he does not.
Yeah, so can go ahead and keep Spellskite here. What Spellskite does do in play is it stops all of Jacob's burn spells from going upstairs.
Okay, gotcha. You see, Ben's going to search out a snow-covered forest with the Path to Exile. And we still, of course, have got the blocker now. Don't forget, Voice of Resurgence token is going to move down a little bit now. It's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to be a 5/5.
Right, so it's going to keep getting smaller, and now this Geist of St. Traft can go ahead and get through it.
It's going to be a 6/6 now because of the Blood Rush on the Geist via the Rampager. So it's a 6/6. As you mentioned, Voice is a 5/5, so damage is going to come across from Trample. We count the Angel damage as well. And what Van Lunen here is, he's trying to work his way through this mess. And he's doing a pretty good job of it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, Rampager is really, has really helped Zoo. And that was something which I don't know if people weren't sure about it when we started testing. Like, when we start testing for the Pro Tour, it was like, you know, people start out with 2 Rampagers in their deck. At least in our testing group, we very quickly moved up to 4 Rampagers. Yep. And that wasn't seen so much at the Pro Tour because no Zoo decks top-aided. But Rampager's been a great tool for the deck. Yeah,
I mean, it does a lot of different things. You know, it can up Tarmogoyf, but, you know, it can up Tarmogoyf. It makes creatures like Geist of St. Traft a little bit better. The one thing I think that is really scary about Rampager is the fact that it exists. You know, the fact that, you know, you don't know how many are looming in a deck list.
Right.
You know, you don't know if people are playing 2, you don't know if people are playing 4, you know if people are playing 0. But if, you know, if I swing a 2/2 into a 3/3, or a 2/2 into a Spellskite, are you going to block?
Right.
Do you dare block? I could have Rampager. Hey, I may not. I might just be a crazy guy attacking into an 0/4. Who knows? But the fact that that card exists and is seeing play in Zoo decks makes it very scary.
Yeah, so Ben's on the... he's on the defensive now. He's gonna need to commit more cards to deal with these threats.
Things have changed very quickly here.
Yep, things have changed. Remember, though, all it's going to take is one Revel Arc to reset the whole chain for Ben.
Yeah, it's like one Lark, one Pod. I mean, honestly, one Draw Step. Hey, even Ranger Vios, which isn't at its best right now, can't search up Deathrite Shaman like it used to be able to, but you know, that can maybe go search out a Viscerus here and a Mana Accelerant, like a Noble Hierarch. Noble Hierarch providing Exalted on the birds. We could have a racing situation. Who knows?
Yeah, no, I'm not even sure if we'll get the Viscera Seer. Okay, yeah, he's just going to go for 2 mana creatures. Remember, the combo really isn't what's important here.
Yeah.
Jacob has so much removal that it's hard to keep the combo safe, and that's not really how you win. You just win by not losing.
That's what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
He was doing a good job of it prior.
If you succeed in not losing for long enough, you probably win.
The not losing style of Magic, that's not for me. I like to get them dead as fast as I can, personally. I would be on the Zoo side of this matchup. Though, Ben is trying his very hardest to stay alive here. Again, he searches up a Birds of Paradise and a Noble Hierarch, but his creature forces are kind of dwindling, and his creatures are all of a sudden nowhere near as big as Van Lunen. So Van Lunen's done a really nice job of pushing through that Voice of Resurgence and that elemental token that was out there. As you see, Cohen's going to deploy that bird. We'll see if he's going to deploy the Hierarch as well.
Yeah, so there's no elemental token left. It's good that Jacob managed to take care of both of them, because those are probably the biggest impediments to him attacking.
See, Ben's going to attack here with the Birds of Paradise. He's going to get an Exalted trigger, so it's going to be an attack here for 2, and he's going to pass the turn back. So he's not going to deploy the other copy of Noble Hierarch, which leads me to believe that he may have a card like Abrupt Decay in his hand right now, since he's leaving.
Sure. He's
leaving back Noble Hierarch for mana and not deploying the other one. We'll see. You know, this could be a bluff here. Have no idea, but we'll find out certainly in just a moment.
Yeah, so that was 1 point of damage by not swinging it.
Yep.
So you'd think he would have something.
It is risky. I mean, at this point, given how this game has gone, you know, we might see a Spellskite trigger here. I mean, maybe he's leaving the blue mana open for Spellskite. We don't really know. As Van Lunen's going to cast Path of Exile to take care of Spellskite now.
Right, this time he actively wants to get rid of Spellskite.
Yeah, because now you take a look at the creatures that are in play on Cohen's side. He's got that Noble Hierarch right now, which is a 1/2. He's got Ranger Veils, which is 3/2, and Birds of Paradise, which is no 1. Against this attack force from Van Lunen, no real great blocks here for Cohen.
No, he's going to take a lot of damage this turn, especially because he has to live in the fear of burn spells. Some number of chump blocks will probably happen.
And this kind of shows here, Matthias, I think, the ability for Zoo to actually, you know, kind of get through a game where the opponent kind of gums things up a little bit. You know, it's got some good creatures. Kurt Ape can get stopped pretty easily here, and we were kind of questioning Geist of St. Traff being left in, but, you know, again, Van Lunen has done a nice way of navigating his way through some of these problems. Now you see him attacking with everybody, so it's got some sustainability.
Right. I mean, Zoo's creatures are so good that you want to be playing a sweeper against them. And the one weakness with Malirapod is it doesn't play sweepers. Instead, you know, it actually just tries to answer all the creatures by outclassing them. Yeah. And that can be really tough when your opponent has cards like Path to Exile in their deck that take care of any creature.
And it has obviously done a very nice job this game, taking care of Voice of Resurgence and Spellskite. Van Lunen swinging in with everybody. You've got Ranger Vios going to get in front of a Kurt Ape. We'll see where that Birds is going to get flattened by. It's going to be the Angel token from Geist of St. Traff. Geist, of course, also attacking along with Gore-Clan Rampager and a Tarmogoyf, which is sitting at a 3/4 due to an instant, a creature, and a land in the graveyard. Spellskite was removed from the game via Path to Exile, so no artifact hiding out down there. But at the end of the day, Cohen is the one doing the chump blocking, and what was favorable for him, especially when that Gavney Township came rolling off, things have changed drastically, and it looks like Jacob Van Lunen, the Pro Tour champion, is in the driver's seat now.
Yeah, I mean, this team's definitely going Jacob's way. Ben did have the acceleration, he had the mana creatures, he had the cards that buy time, like Kitchen Finks or Voice, but he didn't actually have the finisher in which he could come up with, whether it's Birthing Pod, whether it's Revel Arc. He needs something to turn the corner on the game, and I think he may come back to that play where he Court of Callinged for a Voice of Resurgence, because his hand had those other pieces, you know, the cards that buy time, the mana accelerants. It's possible that Cord had to find something bigger, and at the end he just didn't have that follow-up spell. His follow-up spell was Gavney Township, which wasn't enough to take the game.
We saw the follow-up spell there from Van Lunen was a Lightning Bolt. That's going to get the job done. We're going to move into a third and final game in round 1 of, you guessed it, 15 here at Grand Prix Richmond. So, a third game between Malirapod and Domain Zoo. We'll watch these players, maybe re-sideboard, maybe not. They're going to check out some things, but I want to talk to you about Lightning Bolt. A lot of people saying that is the best card in Modern. it is the go-to removal spell. It is incredibly flexible. It kind of decides what's playable and what's not. You know, you want to have things that are for toughness or pass the Lightning Bolt test, as it were. How do you feel about those sentiments of Lightning Bolt being, you know, the best card?
I don't think I can really argue with it. Lightning Bolt's very efficient. You know, for 3 damage for 1 mana is really unmatched in the format. And I think the whole Lightning Bolt test is a really accurate way to describe creatures. You see decks like Zoo playing Bolt as a removal spell and as a spell that can go upstairs. You see decks like Burn playing Bolt just to send it upstairs. You see decks like Blue, White, Red playing Lightning Bolt as a 1-mana removal and eventually as a win con. It's so efficient that I think most red decks, the question is, why are you not running Lightning Bolt?
Sure.
And I think that really speaks to the power of the card. I would agree that it is one of the best cards in Modern.
You know, it almost got to the point where it felt like Jund was just playing red for Lightning Bolt, especially when Bloodbraid Elf kind of left as well. Of course, they do have access to some red cards, you know, Olivia Valdir, Hunt Master of the Fells, things of that nature, but it almost got to the point where, you know, you could just play straight black-green, but Lightning Bolt's so good, hey, let's throw it in there.
Yeah, we actually saw some players play just straight black-green, but I do think Lightning Bolt is just it's just such a good removal spell. For its mana cost, that you're right, people play it in their black-green decks just so that they can have it.
Yeah, and you even mentioned too that the different roles that it plays. It's it's a control element in Blue, White, Red. It's an aggro element in Zoo. It's a hyper aggro element, obviously, in Burn. But you know, even a deck like Twin, for example, you know, it defends itself with a card like Lightning Bolt, as does Storm, to be able to take care of those problematic cards. Incredibly versatile. It slices, it dices, as they say.
So people can play 3/3s for 1 in this format, like Wild Nakato, and you know, Lightning Bolt is pretty much tailor-made to answer that.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason they unbanned the card too, because there is an answer already in place. It's possible.
It certainly puts pressure on players. You know, what are the 1-mana cards that answer Wild Nakato? And there aren't too many. You know, there's Path to Exile, but you really don't want to do that on turn 1. There's Lightning Bolt. You can play Flame Slash. That's possible. You can play Death Mark, but you probably have to sideboard that card. You know, there aren't, and that's pretty much it for like 1-mana answers to Wild Nakato.
If you're a little crazy, you can play Dismember.
Yeah, okay, you can play Dismember, but now we're getting into the realm of, you know, you're taking 4.
Which is what the Wild Nakato deck wants you to do anyway. So.
Right, so they already won. They win the war. They win the battle there if you had to do that.
Yeah. It's a powerful card, both of them, honestly, Wild Nakato and Lightning Bolt. And of course, if you guys are just joining us, Cedric Phillips Mathiasson, and soon to be Patrick Chapin, we are in Richmond for the Grand Prix at SCG Live. Hashtag GPRichmond for your tweets. You see people walking around behind Ben Cohen, watching behind Jacob Van Lunen. There are 4,300 players in attendance. That doesn't even account for the people who are playing inside events and just hanging out and watching. We've got a very, very full convention center here, and we are very happy to bring you guys coverage of this tournament all weekend long. We've got 9 rounds of Modern action today. We've got 6 more Swiss rounds tomorrow, and then we've got our elimination rounds before we do crown a champion for the largest constructed Grand Prix of all time. It's going to be an absolute blast. We hope you guys can stay with us all weekend long. A ton of storylines. I know Modern's picking up in popularity. This kind of showcases that. And the Pro Tour was a blast to watch, and I can't wait to watch how this event unfolds.
Well, I think if, you know, Modern started about 2 years ago as a format, and if I were to tell you that the first Grand Prix to pass 4,000 people 2 years ago would be a Modern Grand Prix, I think you wouldn't have believed it.
No, not even close.
You'd say, oh, well, it must have been a standard event, or maybe one of the European legacy events.
Yep.
You'd be like, no, it's actually, it's an American Modern event.
The format has it has grown. You know, we've seen a lot of bannings and unbannings, things like that, as Wizards tries to figure out what the appropriate way to have this format go. But, you know, I'm actually okay with the fact that they've been banning and unbanning things, because it is important to try to get it right. You know, it might look a little weird. It's like, yeah, you ban Wild Nakato, then you unban Wild Nakato. But you know what? Let's get it right. If you have to unban some stuff and ban some stuff to make sure that everything's okay, you know, we might see Deathrite Shaman get unbanned in the next unbanning. Who knows? But, you know, it makes things interesting. It shakes things up, and, you know, it makes the format a lot more fun, in my opinion.
Yeah, I really like how it's been balanced. I think Wild Nakato coming back into the format has been largely good for the format. It does put a lot of speed on it. Like, actually, decks like Malirapod, I think sometimes can actually have a difficult time with Wild Nakato, just because that creature is so big. You know, it's so efficient that it puts a lot of other creatures, like, for you to play a creature that's not Wild Nakato, it has to have a very relevant ability, because it's just not going to match up to Nakato on size.
Looks like Cohen took a mulligan here. He's going to be on the play. He's going to play Verdant Catacombs, and we are underway in game number 3 here. Van Lunen kept his 7. You see him move a Temple Garden to the front. There's an Arid Mesa as well. So one of the things that you have to do when you're playing zoos, you got to figure out exactly what lands to go get and what order to get them in. He's going to start with the Arid Mesa, going to go down to 19, and in a moment here, I believe it will be 17, as we'll see what dual land he wants to search out and what 1-drop he's going to play.
Yeah, well, it looks like he has a Curd Ape. The risk of his hand is I don't think he has very many creatures in it.
Okay.
He has a Tribal Flames. I believe he has a pair of Path to Exiles. So he's going to be able to shut down Ben's plan. That's a more difficult line for him in the game. Flooding, triple 1-drop is really what he wants against Malyrapod, and this hand at least is not going to hit triple 1-drop.
At least he'll start with at least one 1-drop. There is the Curd Ape. It's only a 1/1 right now, waiting for the forest, but we know he has a Temple Garden in his hand, so he's okay. As Ben is going to sacrifice Verdant Catacombs, go get a Temple Garden. He's going to start fixing his mana, keep his life total as high as he can when he's playing against Zoo, and we'll see what his second turn is going to involve, because don't forget, again, he did take a mulligan this game. So we don't know exactly the contents and how good his hand is, but he's already underneath a little bit of pressure here from the Zoo deck.
Yeah, unfortunately, Malyrapod's a deck that can really, it can sacrifice that card. It'll make up card advantage very quickly if its strategy works out.
Did catch a glimpse of Ben's hand as he does draw a card. It's a Temple Garden. He'll untap the other Temple Garden, of course. He does have a copy of Wall of Roots in his hand. He's going to play Overgrown Tomb. He's going to go down to 17. We'll see if he will deploy the 05, and he will. So Wall of Roots is going to join the party here as Van Lunen is going to untap that Steam Vents. He'll take a draw. It's a Lightning Bolt. He's going to play Temple Garden untap. And we talk about the power of a card like Gorklan Rampager. This is it right here.
Yeah, he's just drawn a Gorklan Rampager. He will have to make a decision as to whether or not he wants to Blood Rush here or just get it as another creature. Because this is only other creature in his hand. I think this attack, to me, makes me think he'll still Blood Rush. But the difficulty is that what Ben's going to have to do is, I believe Ben has a Birthing Pod, and the question will be whether or not Ben can ever stick a creature to pod away.
Yeah. That's one of the goals when you play against Birthing Pod. Just kill all the creatures. If I kill all the creatures, I'll be okay. And maybe if you don't draw one, or you can't play a creature and activate pod in the same turn, or if you have to, maybe you have to pay 2 life to do it. So no blocks there from Ben. He ends up taking the 2. He's going to go down to 15. Needs to preserve that Wall of Roots, he feels. As you mentioned, does have a Birthing Pod in his hand, but that gets a little bit expensive.
Yeah, life points are really important in this matchup, especially with the amount of burn that Jacob has. I'm not sure you can just take 4 to go turn your Wall of Roots into a Kitchen Finks.
Shriekmaw hiding out in Cohen's hand right now as well. He might want to deploy that. That would actually be a pretty nice turn here, as Van Lunen doesn't have anything else to do, so he's going to evoke the Shriekmaw.
And I really like this play from Ben. Because Jacob didn't make another creature, you have to think that Jacob has a heavy burn hand, so you want to take away the damage spell, the card that can deal damage more than once, and that would be Curd Ape.
Now, one interesting thing that I suppose Van Lunen could have done, it would have been a little radical, I suppose. He could have killed his own Curd Ape, and then the Shriekmaw would have had to kill Wall of Roots. I'm not saying that's correct, but that's something that could have happened.
Yeah, and that actually wouldn't have been the worst idea, because it would have ramped him into Gorklan Rampager.
Yeah.
So I actually do... That's a line that's not unreasonable to play.
And now we're going to see Birthing Pod. We saw in the first game, it drew the concession from Van Lunen. Now you got Birthing Pod in the stack, and you see Van Lunen considering, all right, maybe I have to Path to Exile this dumb Wall of Roots, because I can't afford to let you start getting activations off this card because it's too much to come back from. But Van Lunen says, all right, that's fine. Add a Wall of Roots counter, going to use the Birthing Pod, don't have to pay any life to do so. Didn't have to pay life, of course, up front for the Birthing Pod. So he will be at 13, but we're going to see what Cohen's going to search out now.
Well, it's probably Kitchen Finks. It's that's your best 3-drop in the matchup. Jacob does have the Path to Exile waiting for Kitchen Finks, but he'll at least Ben will get the 2 life off it. And now with an active Birthing Pod, every creature becomes a very serious threat.
And unsurprisingly, we're going to see Kitchen Finks show up here. Trigger's going to go on. Cohen's going to go back to 15. And as you mentioned, now Van Lunen is in this spot where it's, okay, now I got to kill everything. And he's going to start by Path to Exiling that Kitchen Finks. Of course, no persist there as it is exiled. Cohen's going to search up a basic. He'll get the snow-covered forest. Van Lunen's going to sacrifice the Misty Rainforest. He's going to search for a dual land. We'll see if maybe he can get a black source off of this turn on Tribal Flames, but it looks like it may just be a stomping ground. But right now, I think, Matthias, Van Lunen is behind right now.
Yeah, well, it's because he has no creature on the board. And we kind of saw that before, is that he had a very creature-light hand. He'll get a creature next turn in Gorklan Rampager, but it may be too late.
Van Lunen will not actually be able to get that land of Misty Rainforest. You see the judge there immediately on it. And again, this is a thing where it's not malicious.
Not every land gets, not every land makes every color. Yeah, it's close.
It's very, very close, but not every land gets everything. And again, this is part of the reason that when you're playing Domain Zoo, you might want to just sit at home and drop some hands and see what lands get which.
If he wanted to Lightning Helix on end step, he could have gotten his Hallowed Fountain there, but then he would be stuck with only one green mana source. I don't think he was ready to do that.
Yeah. Also be stuck with one red mana source too. Make things very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So Van Lunen looks like he has a 4th land to play. And we saw him cast Scorecline Rampager last game, and he might be priced into having to do that again this game. He's got a Misty Rainforest. You see his hand right now. He's got the Curd Ape, got another copy of Path. There is the Misty. Looks like he's going to go with just the Ape, perhaps?
Yeah, I think he's going to go with Ape and then Burn Spell. What he really wants to make sure he does here is just use his mana efficiently. Because of this, I'm not as big of a fan of this because he's leaving a mana on the table. For me with Jacob, it's like, can he cast all his spells fast enough?
Yeah. Another thing, too, is when you take a look at the mana base here for the Domain Zoo deck, Tribal Flames, ideally, you want all 5 colors of mana. How does he search up black lands? What black lands does he have?
Is it just Blood Crypt?
It's just a Blood Crypt.
So he can't get it off this Misty.
Correct. You see Cohen has drawn his card for the turn. He's got that Restoration Angel. He's also got a copy of Murderous Redcap. Murderous Redcap, the old combo with the Birthing Pod.
Any of these persist creatures quite strong with Birthing Pod.
And you've talked about quite a bit. You've brought up Revelark in this matchup and how important it is. And the fact that Redcap can come into play. You can sacrifice it, get it back, of course. You see Cohen's going to go upstairs with Redcap and deal Van Lunen too. And he can actually go get Revelark. And that's when things get very, very difficult. Now, I like the play here from Jake a lot, because as good as Murderous Redcap is with Birthing Pod, it has a trigger.
Right, so he can't sack it right away. I think Ben was playing around that. If he actually thought he would get the Birthing Pod activation off of it, he would have killed the Curd Ape.
Sure.
Because he could have gone 2 and then 1 on the Persist. I think Ben was expecting a path, which is why he sent the 2 damage at Jacob's face.
So again, you mentioned it's kill everything when there's a Birthing Pod in play to the best of your ability. Van Lunen is 2 for 2 on that front.
Exactly.
Murderous Redcap hasn't happened. We also saw Wall of Roots die, so we actually haven't seen Birthing Pod really do very much. It did get a Kitchen Finks momentarily, but Van Lunen is doing a nice job of stopping Birthing Pod from actually doing anything this game. You see he's going to sacrifice Misty Rainforest. He's going to go a little bit lower, but his life total really isn't under duress, as we're going to see what land Van Lunen can search up here. The only thing he still needs is the black source, but he can't find it right now. You see him go by Stony Silence.
Yeah, he's boarded that in for the matchup. It's good against Spellskite and Birthing Pod.
Yeah. There's the Hallowed Fountain that you did mention, so we might see a Lightning Helix here on the end step.
I do think that's what we're going to see.
He's going to go upstairs. He's going to gain 3, go back to 12. Cohen's actually going to go down to 12. So, hey, we're even.
It's even.
It's an even game, right?
Yeah, it's for now. I mean, to be fair, Jacob does have, I know, at least 4 more points of burn in his hand and a Rampager, so he actually has 8 points right now. It's 10 with the Curd Ape. He's 1 Lightning Bolt from lethal. Yeah. And if he puts, if he puts Ben down to 2, then Ben can't pay for Birthing Pod. And speaking of Lightning Bolt.
Speak of the devil, and it shall appear. Now, he's not going to be able to get it all done this turn.
Doesn't have enough mana. And as I said, how that mana efficiency was really important if he'd been able to use the mana, all 4 of it on that previous turn. Well, he actually did end up using all 4.
Yeah, he ended up using all of it.
So that was good.
He's just 1 red mana short of getting the job done this turn. You see he's going to attack here with the Curd Ape, Blood Rush the Rampager. Cohen's going to go down to 6. Van Lunen's hand right now is a Tribal Flames and a Lightning Bolt. He needs to make it out of this turn alive. That's the big deal. He needs to prevent Cohen from gaining any life. Cohen untaps, he draws a card. We know he has Restoration Angel. We don't know the rest of the contents, but we're going to find out what happens here in just a moment.
Well, if he has Kitchen Finks, that's very bad news for Jacob, because the Restoration Angel plus Kitchen Finks will probably be too strong. If he doesn't, however, then I think Jacob will be able to get this.
You see Cohen's going to pass the turn back, which is the best case scenario here for Jake. Jake is going to untap, doesn't fire a bolt in the end of turn. No, he does have to be wary of a card like Court of Calling right now, which Cohen can cast to gain some life. So Van Lunen's going to start by attacking for 2. Here's a Restoration Angel. That's going to block. It's going to eat the Curd Ape. Are we going to see Van Lunen go for it? He's going to start off with a Lightning Bolt. It says deal 3 to you. Cohen's going to go down to 3.
Yeah, I think I think this will work.
Here's a Tribal Flames, and that is going to do it. Jacob Van Lunen with Domain Zoo is going to start off Grand Prix Richmond 1-0, defeating Ben Cohen playing Melirapod 2 games to 1.
Yeah, and